Hey, everybody on YouTube and on AM 1230 WJOB and 104.7 FM. I'm Jim Diedlow. I am the morning host here and the owner, but right now we're going to do a special segment. We're going to do a special segment of the Wieser podcast, and on the line right now is Jim Wieser, of course, former. Hey, Jim, how are you?
Hey, Jim.
Yes, we are here, and you are live on the radio and on YouTube and your podcast. So tell us what happened in Indianapolis today.
Well, a miracle happened. It's incredible. It's historic. The Indiana Senate did not pass the redistricting. They denied it.
And why is that important?
Well, I think it's important for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a horrible bill. It's horrible legislation. It goes contrary to as I've stated before, the principles of the Constitution and our form of government. It signifies to me that people in Indiana have their Hoosier values, and they won't be bullied. They won't. They'll stand up for what is right and what they believe in, and they did it. And stood up to the President of the United States, and the swatting calls and the threats. Amazing, just incredibly strong people. 21. There were more Republicans that voted against it than voted for it. That's unheard of. Together with the 10 Democrats.
Yeah, I think all Democrats voted against it, of course, and then you had a number. It was 31-19. The Republican-controlled Senate in a stunning rebuke to the President of the United States and to Republican Governor Mike Braun after they unleashed unprecedented political pressure on Hoosier lawmakers. That's according to the Times. What kind of pressure were you hearing that was from the President and the Governor, Jim?
Well, the pressure from the President, he made direct calls to the Republican senators from our area. And I think the nature, as I understand it, as I've been told, the nature of the calls were, you got to, this is important. You got to stay with the party. You can't back down. We need this. And if you don't, then, the threat was being primaried.
Do you think that'll happen? I saw that the one of the final comments by people will all be primaried. Do you think that's a real fear for the people who voted against this?
I wouldn't call it a fear. I would call it a concern and an expectation. And I think it'll happen. They're not going to let it go because they're cruel. They govern by meanness and cruelty and threats, and why should they change their stripes now? Braun and Trump are two peas in a pod, and that's how they operate, and it's ultimately going to be their demise.
So all 7 region senators, both Republicans and Democrats, uniformly voted to maintain the state's current congressional districts despite repeated swatting attempts, bomb threats, and other terrorist attacks aimed at getting them to vote the other way. That would be, if I could give some of the names right here that were especially being watched, Ed Charbonneau, a Republican out of Valparaiso, he voted against the bill. Dan Durnell, who voted against the bill as a Republican, and may be one of the most surprising of all is Senator Rick Niemeyer out of Lowell voted against the Braun/Trump supported bill. What do you make of those 3 voting against this thing?
I'll do them one at a time because I know them all very well. I've been on a couple committees with Ed Charbonneau in my past life as an elected official. He is his character is unquestionable and unquestioned. He's a man of principle. I'm not surprised at all that he did that. I harkened back to the show yesterday, or whenever we did the Tuesday. I harkened back to the podcast I did on Tuesday when I said what I would tell Rick or what I would tell Dan as to why they should vote against the bill, and that's what they did, because they come from principled families and principled backgrounds, and they're not going to be intimidated, and they're not going to be pushed around. I may not agree with them very often in terms of legislation, but I've never questioned either one of theirs, either Rick or Dan, about their moral compass.
Let's talk about each one of those. Rick Niemeyer ran against Frank Mervan. Randy Niemeyer ran against Frank Mervan. Rick Niemeyer in the family also. Randy had a lot to gain out of this. Rick votes no. What do you make of that?
I don't know that I'd want to be at the family Christmas party. I'm not sure about that, but it goes back to what I said. Rick's just a guy that has principles and stands by him, and you can agree to disagree, and you can be relatives and not get along all the time. Especially when you're faced with this kind of a decision to make. It was a monumental decision.
What about Dan Durnell? Dan was obviously in the national spotlight for getting swatted, and some were speculating that may have been enough on Dan Durnell. What do you make of that intense pressure on him?
If let's say between the two of them, Rick and Dan, if somebody was going to ultimately vote the other way and vote in favor of the bill, the one you would think more logically would be Dan, because he doesn't come across as being, Rick's a no-nonsense guy, and Rick's a pretty decisive guy. Dan weighs things. He thinks of the pros and the cons and the goods and the bads, and reaches out and talks to people, and then ultimately makes a decision. So oftentimes he kind of comes across as being non-committal, but Dan's not a non-committal guy. He's got a backbone, and it showed itself today.
So Charbonneau is also a no. That's a little bit surprising too. I mean, none of these people went with Braun and Trump, and they're all locals. It's almost as if the Democrats and the Republicans almost voted in a block up here. I mean, all of them voted no. So
I assume that Senator Bohasic also voted no from the Shannon Shores.
Iowa Senate declared his opposition. Yes, neither state Senator Ed Charbonneau, Durnell, or Niemeyer spoke during the Senate debate. Bohasic had previously declared his opposition, but let me confirm that by looking at the list. Yes, Bohasic voted against the bill also.
Yeah.
So what is it? It's a total of 7 up here.
Right.
And they all voted no. I mean, what do we have? A Northwest Indiana delegation, regardless of party?
I'm sorry. Say that.
Yeah. Do we have a North? Is it? I mean, it's almost like it was a Northwest Indiana delegation, regardless of party.
It's kind of that's sort of an interesting fact that until we just started talking about it, I didn't realize. I think in some discussions that I had, I think that they believed strongly that the maps that they did, and I've spoken about this before, in 2021 were really well constructed, well devised, consistent with the law, consistent with constitutional principles, and consistent with the theory of communities of interest. And I think all of them have seen the benefit that has brought this area, has brought Northwest Indiana in terms of economic development, in terms of funding, in terms of making their voice stronger downstate as a result of that. And I think that was an important factor in their thought process.
He's Jim Wieser. This is the Wieser podcast. You can get this in full in about 20 minutes. Here we are at recording it in the afternoon of Thursday, December 11th. If you're listening at a later date, it'll be a little clearer right now. It's just kind of we're just happened, and we're digesting the fact that the Indiana Senate, which means the Indiana in general, voted against Donald Trump's request or demand, and Governor Mike Braun's going along with them, voted against them to redistrict Indiana. Of course, that affects us most here, right here in the northwest part of Indiana, where we have kind of a rectangular district, and the proposed district was kind of reaching and taking Lake County and then stretching it all the way to Wabash, Indiana. So, I got one other question on this, Jim, and we covered this in your podcast. What does this say? I mean, this might be one of the biggest direct rebukes of Donald Trump. What does that say, perhaps, about the changing of the power of the presidency?
It says that it is changing. The Republican Party, on a national scale, is completely fractured, and the people. It's the people and the electorate. Let's just look around in the last couple of weeks to elections. We elected a Democratic governor in New Jersey in double digits, a Democratic governor in Virginia in double digits, a new mayor in Miami who won by almost 20 points in an area that Trump won by 20 points. It's not a secret anymore. People are fed up with government that governs, as I said the other day, by malevolence and incompetence, and they're tired of it, and they don't want to hear it anymore. They don't want to hear mockery of the term affordability. They know that Trump wouldn't know what affordability was if it hit him over the head, because the man hasn't set his foot in a grocery store in his entire life. So that's what people are reacting to this, and it's going to lead, I believe, to an incredible success in 2026 for the Democrats, and an incredible success for our constitutional form of government.
He's Jim Wieser. This is a special episode. If you want to get the rest of his podcast, just go to Wieser, Wieser, at Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Final comment, Jim.
It's a great day. It is absolutely a great day. It's got to restore people's faith in government and people's faith in your elected officials that'll stand up to the attacks of not only of Donald Trump and Governor Braun, but to personal attacks on them, to the people that are unfortunately taken in by whatever it is that Trump and Braun are offering, and they stood up to that, and they're to be congratulated and saluted. It's a great, great day.
Let's call it right there. Thanks a lot, Jim. This is the Wieser podcast, and I'm Jim Delow. Just came down to do a little special segment and get that out to you live on the radio, but also it'll be posted on Wieser's podcast here in about 20 minutes. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and until next time, see you later.